Are you getting enough vitamin D? Most of us aren't. Did you know that 70% of Americans aren't getting enough vitamin D? Why is vitamin D important anyways? We all know that we can get vitamin D from our fortified milk and all these other things, and obviously we need it from our natural sunlight, but how really important is it? So let's talk about a couple things and a couple things that you guys can do to make sure that you guys are getting enough vitamin D and why you should be getting your blood levels checked. Probably the most notable thing about vitamin D is that it directly is involved in over 1,000 expressions of our genes. Guess how much that is? It's about 1/24 of our human genome. So all of our DNA, it's a little over 4%. So think about that. Over 4% of our genes are related to vitamin D. Pretty heavy when you consider the fact that we often downplay, well, I have bad genes, I have this runs in my family, this cancer runs in my family. When we look at the major drivers for these things, people usually have things that go in their family, such as diabetes, heart disease, cancer, certain types of cancer. Well, it's because you grow up eating the same things, you have the same nutritional drivers in your body. So vitamin D regulating almost 4% or over 4% of those is pretty significant, and that's why we can't downplay the role of vitamin D. Another really important thing about vitamin D is it's fat soluble. So something that I witness every day in the hospital, and you don't even need to be in the hospital scene to witness this. We all have somebody in our family who's overweight. We all have somebody in our family who has that big distended belly, and we all even know somebody, say your family is thin. All you have to do is look around to see that we have chronic obesity. We have morbid obesity, not even in the United States, but around the world. So when you consider that the more fat we have, that means that the less vitamin D is circulating around our blood, which means it's not being acted on how it's supposed to in our body because it's being sucked into the fat. When we're not getting enough vitamin D, we have increased oxidation, which is just a fancy way of saying we have more inflammation on the body. We have more stress on the body. Now, it's important to put our own stress on the body in the correct way, like exercise, positive stress, because we have things that if we add just a little bit of stress or a little bit of negativity to our body, it's a wrong way to put it. But if we add the right amounts of stress to our body actually reacts in a positive way. And like I mentioned, one of the most important notable things is exercise. Our body bounces back and responds to that. So there's a really nice give and take about nature. But when we talk about inflammation, the bottom line of every chronic disease is inflammation. It doesn't matter if you have cancer, if you have diabetes, if you have high blood pressure. All these are symptoms of baseline inflammation across the body. Oxidative stress. Literally on the cellular level, certain micro things happen within the cells and outside the cells and within the blood, and it just expands and goes all the way up the levels, and so we feel it and we actually get that effect in our body. Who doesn't want to live longer? Some people don't. But even if you are one of those people who are like, I'm going to be 30 years old and I'm going to die and I'm going to go out, woohoo! The important thing to note, everybody wants to live that quality of life, okay? So what's the point of living 120 years if you're just going to sit on the couch and be afraid and all these other things? You know, if you're going to be catatonic, if you're just going to sit there. You know, I would rather live 40, 50 years and have time of my life, right? So it's the quality of aging that we need to consider when we're looking at vitamin D. On a super nerdy level, if we look at our DNA and say it's a shoestring, right? The little tips, the little plastic tips on the end, or the metal ones, consider those, they're called telomeres. And those are actually a biomarker when we look at them under a microscope, and actually we can measure aging. And when we put certain things on the body, or take certain things out of the body, or put certain stress or inflammation, what I just talked about, it can actually shorten our lifespan, and it actually shortens those telomeres. Now with those telomeres, I'm not going to get into this. I'm just saying one more quick note. And as we age, you know, cells, they like to replicate. The whole goal of a cell is to pass on its DNA to the next cell because they all have a life cycle, right? And one of the problems with cancer is it's hijacked into thinking that, okay, I need to replicate and I need to survive. That's literally, it doesn't matter if it's a tree on the ground. We all see those weeds. We all pull weeds. It's in nature to try to do the best you can and to try to strive on a cellular level. So with that said, those telomeres, they want to pass down the DNA to the next life cycle of cells before they go, and they're designed by the body to be recycled and die. The problem is when there's a DNA break or there's a mutation in the genes, which are mostly regulated by what I just mentioned, vitamin D, right? This is how important this is. So it actually shortens those telomeres quicker. And every time the DNA gets transferred and more cells happen because we age and it's just a natural life cycle, they get shorter and shorter and shorter. And there's some very specific things that can happen to those telomeres that I'm not going to get into in this video. But the point is that it's a biological marker for aging, and they naturally get shorter and shorter and shorter, but they can actually get shorter and shorter because we're not getting enough vitamin D. They get shorter quicker, and that can also be an increased risk of cancer and more inflammation on the body. So the last thing I'm going to touch on are some other very basic things where I'm going to mention, and it might be signs that you might need to go get your vitamin D levels checked. If you have brain fogginess, if you have impairment in learning, so that's why vitamin D is absolutely crucial to growing in kids, especially because the DNA is being replicated, new cells are being divided all the time, so all that genetic expression is being passed down from cell to cell to cell to cell every time it replicates. So we need to make sure that all that is working nice and smoothly, and vitamin D is going to have a direct expression on all those things. So if some of the things we could be experiencing are, like I said, the learning impairments, the depression, the mental fogginess, these are all things. Literally on the nerdy level, which I always love getting into, hope you follow me, for those who are nerds too, we actually get decreased nerve cell growth and growth factors that are important to, our brain responses. And so it just goes to show how important and how many different body systems that vitamin D touches. So that's all I want to touch on for this one. I didn't want to get too in depth in it because there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to know. There's a lot that I don't know. There's a lot that I don't understand. And that's okay. I think that that's how health should go. We should admit when we don't know things. We should admit when we do know things, because it's all about being able to help each other, being able to lend your knowledge into someone else's life and how to make them better and how to have them age better. Because as I mentioned a few minutes ago, what's the point of living all this life if you're not going to have a quality of life? And I think I have a very unique perspective because I see a decreased quality of life in patients every single day in the hospital. There's people who are 35 years old who are so sick because they don't take care of their body, and it's easy to downplay the biggest factor, nutritional driving, meaning just the number one driver for our health is nutrition, the things we put into the body, which means it's what we're going to get out of the body in exchange for that. It's so easy to play the victim. It's so easy to say, oh, I have this because my mom had this, or, this runs in my family, when we're not even taking into account that, major diseases and cancers are just a smidgen. They're just a small percentage of all these things. And yes, DNA has something to play in that, but we're not looking at what drives the DNA. Okay, we're not looking at what sits on top of the DNA, called epigenetics, and how nutrition and other things that we're literally putting into the body to get fuel, to get resources. Because how else will the body work? We have to eat, so why not make it nutrient-dense, real food, and you're going to feel better anyways. And we're not looking at these things and how they play a role on top of the DNA and how that expresses in our body. So with that said, protect yourselves, and I hope you got some value. Share this, tag somebody that you love, share it with somebody that you know, and go get your vitamin D levels checked. If you're below 12 ng per ml, meaning nanograms per milliliter, it's really bad. The sweet spot is between 40 and 60. And I take a lot of vitamin D. I supplement it, try to get in my food too. There's nutrient-rich foods, and there's some really good supplements that you can get too. But as always, food source is the best way to get it. Make sure you're getting your vitamin D, because they have to act together correctly in the body to get the real effect, the real healing effect in the body, and to keep that aging process working correctly. So see you guys on the next video.